Good morning, and I should also say probably good afternoon for those on the East Coast, and welcome. It's been a few weeks now since we've had one of our baking sessions, but we've had the Chagim, we've had the holidays, and now it's time to restart our Sephardic baking. And I'm very, very excited to have with us this morning Nicole Scharhon, who's going to be doing a Bulema baking. Nicole and her husband Andrew are really good family friends, and we're happy that that Nicole is here this morning to show everything that she has learned from her husband's family about Bulemas. And although she's not a born Sephardic, she's really taken it into her elements, and she's going to be demonstrating everything today. So Nicole, take it away.
All right, thank you, Rabbi. All right, I'm excited to show everyone how to make bulemas today. This is a fun process because they start with a yeasted dough. So we've posted the recipe, and what I'm going to do this morning is show you all how to make the dough and give you an idea of what it looks like. And then through the magic of television, bring out a beautifully risen bulema dough so we can show the process of rolling them, which is really the hardest part, and that's where you need some practice. So I'm gonna get started with our yeast dough. My husband's Auntie Ray, great Auntie Ray, who taught him how to make this recipe, always used fresh yeast for this, but I know that can be hard to come by. So I'm just gonna use 2 packets of Fleischmann's active dry yeast. You can use any yeast that you have though. Fresh is fine, you just want to translate it based on your variety of yeast. So 2 packets of active dry yeast. Then to that, let me make sure you can now see my bowl. I'm gonna go grab 2 1/4 cups of warm water to add to the yeast. I will be right back. Okay. All right, so we're gonna add that to our yeast and mix it in just to get it. I usually just do this by hand. You can kind of feel when the granules have dissolved. We're just gonna be old school. So let's see, our little yeast granules are starting to dissolve. And once they do, I don't usually proof my yeast before I add the flour. I think as long as it's not expired, you're usually pretty safe. But you can proof it if you feel like you need to, just for some little extra assurance. If it doesn't get all foamy, that means your yeast is expired and you want to start over, or you're not going to get nicely risen bulemas. Pro tip I've learned over all my years of baking bread. All right. That's pretty well dissolved. Get a shmata to wipe my hands. Rabbi, how do you say shmata in Ladino? Kanimazu. All right. Let's just stick with the right language.
I don't know what a shmata is.
You don't know what a shmata is?
I'm playing with you. I'm playing.
Oh, okay.
Nicole, you should know there's 60 people now on the Zoom.
60 people. Wait. Okay. I better be on my best behavior. I better be on my best behavior. All right. So now we've got our lovely yeast water. And we're going to add about 4 1/2 cups to 5 cups of flour. So just you kind of go by feel here, but I think that 5 not super packed cups is a good measurement. I don't weigh it. Auntie Ray never weighed it, so I'm just going like this. In fact, she probably used a cup out of her cupboard to measure this instead of a real measuring cup. I actually had to translate one of my other auntie's recipes for bizcochos. She taught them to my husband and me one day and brought over the very cup that she used for the measurement because we didn't want the recipe to die. And so as she was measuring out the bizcocho flour, we took it and we put it into a real measuring cup so we could record the recipe. All right, so now I've got 4 cups. I'm gonna start with 4 in here. And I'm gonna add a nice little pinch of kosher salt just for some additional flavor. This is just, you know, kind of based on your taste preference, but I do a good big pinch. I like to use Diamond Crystal kosher salt for everything. I think it has a really nice salt level. I think Morton, sometimes the size can be a little too salty. But whatever you have on hand is fine for that.
Nicole, what type of flour is this?
This is just regular all-purpose. I just buy a big bag of all-purpose unbleached flour from Costco because I bake a lot. So we're just gonna mix this. I like to use a spatula for the first part, just to kind of get it incorporated. And then when I add the last cup, then I switch to my hands. So I'm gonna disappear again for a minute after I add the last cup so I can rinse my hands off and then show you all what a nicely risen Bulema dough looks like. All right, so now we've got our 4 cups, kind of floppy. So let's take the last cup here. When I do flour, if I'm not weighing it, I kind of like to aerate it a little bit by dumping it back in. I think that gives you a better, more, better measurement. So you don't want your flour to be too packed. The other thing I've learned from Food Network mostly is there's a big difference with flour when you are using it between a really packed cup or a sifted cup. I mean, it can be pretty substantial. So the more I bake, the more I've started to weigh it. But for this one, I think as long as you aerate it, it's really fine. It can be pretty forgiving. So I've got 5 cups of flour in here, and I'm just kind of squishing it in by hand. So as you can see, it's getting some nice stretchiness, and my hand is all gross. All right, let's get that going. And as I do this, I just sort of scratch the sides of the bowl because some of the flour gets a little stuck to it. I want to make sure I get that all nice and incorporated into my Bulema dough so they're smooth. This is not the easiest recipe in the world because of the forming process. The ingredients are easy, making the dough is pretty straightforward, but forming these bad boys, that's a little tougher. And that's where you need some practice. So I'm gonna show a couple of different methods of forming them today. One that's the more traditional way that I learned, and then one that's a little easier as you get started. Okay, so now this is mixed nicely. You can see it's still pretty soft, gooey-ish dough. No need to knead, no pun intended. I am just gonna get as much of this off my fingers as I can and then rinse off real quickly, and then we'll get started with our filling. All right, I'll be right back. The door? Oh, all right. So now I've got, through the magic of television, a beautifully risen Bulema dough. Actually exploded a little bit. See, my yeast was good. I didn't even need to proof it. But as you can see, you've got this really nice risen dough there. All right, so now that we've got that, I'm gonna preheat my oven to, oh, I believe it was 400. Okay, let's get that started. Okay, so here's our risen dough. Here's our non-risen dough. So as you can see, it really did bulk up by about twice, which is wonderful. That's exactly what we're looking for. I'm gonna set that to the side while we make our filling. Okay. So, got more dough on my hand.
Nicole, can you remind us how long do you leave the dough to rise for?
I got disconnected.
You're back, great. How long do you leave the dough to rise for?
Oh, I left the dough to rise for about 1 hour. It can, sometimes it's faster. If you have an oven with a proofing setting, sometimes it'll go a little faster or even explode over the sides of the bowl, which is what happened to mine. That's okay, it'll be fine. It'll still survive. So I'm gonna make the filling right now. You can see here I've got some nice baby spinach. I like to devein it because the veins can poke holes in your Bulema dough, and it's a very thin dough, so we don't want that. So I usually just recruit my husband or a nice friend to help me with this process, and we just kind of hold them in half and yank these little veins out, the stems. Auntie Ray, who taught me this recipe, said that traditionally you can keep these and saute them with a little olive oil and lemon juice, and they're very good. So whatever you feel like, you can toss them, you can saute them up. Spinach is very healthy for you though, so maybe don't waste those. Okay, so now we've got our lovely spinach. I'm gonna take it over here with my cutting board and my knife. And we'll start by just chopping the spinach up. Now, something I've learned over making these over the years is don't chop the spinach too fine because you put it into the dough raw. And if you chop it too finely, what can happen is it'll release too much water and they will have a tendency to explode. Which is not good. Actually, the exploded part is delicious, and you can still pick it off the bottom of the pan and eat it, but they don't look as pretty. So I'm gonna cut the spinach up. I usually just roll it. Let me move this a little closer here so you can see. Usually just kind of roll it up and just kind of make some nice rough chops to our spinach right here. So I'm gonna do that. That kind of roughly chopped spinach, as you can see. We're gonna put that into our bowl. Now I wrote a pound of spinach on the recipe. I've never actually measured this part though. Auntie Ray had a bowl that she used and she would just kind of fill the bowl with the spinach. And that was the measurement. So I just kind of take a big bowl in my kitchen, probably the one you use for popcorn. Is a good idea. You have a popcorn bowl or a big glass Pyrex bowl. So you can see kind of from the size of me how big that is. We're going to take our roughly chopped spinach. I'm going to do a little bit more and throw it into the bowl. Okay. Let's just get a little more spinach here. I didn't devein all of it, but I think this will be okay. That's the benefit of the baby spinach. Is the stems aren't as tough. So if you miss a few, you're not gonna kill your Bulemas. All right.
Nicole, can you use frozen spinach?
You know, I never have. I've always used fresh because that was the recipe that I had. So if you ever try it with frozen, let me know how it goes. If you do use frozen.
I've only eaten Bulemas. I've never made them.
Yeah. Yeah, I would. So I've always made them with fresh. That was the recipe. But if you do use frozen, or try to use frozen, make sure that you drain it really well before you bake them. And you would probably need quite a bit. So, because you know how it shrinks down so much when it's cooked. So if you try it out, my advice would be to defrost it and drain it super, super well, like squeeze all the water out.
I mean, that's what we do when you do courgette, we do that. So
Yeah.
Same kind of thing.
Yeah. But you could definitely try it. I would be curious. Okay. So let me do a little bit more spinach, and then we will get started mixing our filling. All right. There we go. Rough chopped spinach. We're ready to go. So now to this spinach, I'm going to add a little handful of flour. This is probably about, I don't know, 1/8 of a cup, 1/8 to 1/4 of a cup, just to mix in with the spinach. And then I just toss it together. So you can see that, pretty good size, very roughly chopped. To that, I'm going to add about, I think it was a cup of shredded Munster. Auntie Ray used to age hers before she added it, or before she made Bulemas. She would sort of pre-cut it into small pieces and then keep it in the fridge for a few weeks, which was really good, but I don't usually plan ahead that much. So I just bought the Miller shredded Munster, and I chopped it up a little bit more finely, and then I add that to my spinach. And then we're also going to add some parm, about 2/3 of a cup of parm.
And Nicole, another question on the spinach. Do you wash it ahead of time?
I bought the pre-washed spinach, the good time saver. But yes, if you didn't buy pre-washed, definitely wash it. And then I'm going to add about 1/3 of a cup of feta. With the feta, you want to make sure that you smooch it really finely, because you don't want the chunks to be too big. So I just kind of took it between my fingers and crumbled it really, really finely. And again, this is just kind of try to minimize things that will break holes into your filling. So now I've got my cheese and my spinach and my flour. I'm also going to add a nice pinch of salt into here. Actually, I'll just do 2. And now mix it together by hand. You can add more cheese if you like them to be very cheesy, but they do have a higher tendency of exploding if you do that. All right, so I'd say I used about 1/2 pound of spinach to this bowl. A lot of times you'll end up making a second batch of filling as you go through the dough, or you might have extra dough. It's pretty flexible in that way. So I'm going to set this to the side, our lovely bowl of spinach, so you can see with the cheese. And now I will grab just a baking dish, like a glass baking dish. This is the next part of the process with the dough, is you take a glass baking dish, fill it with some vegetable oil, about 1/2 inch of it. Don't worry, you don't end up using all this oil. It just kind of keeps your dough from sticking. And then I oil my hands, take my risen dough, and we're going to break off nice little chunks, about yay big, so about golf ball sized chunks of dough, and just plop it right into our oil. So what I do when I do this is I just kind of grab a chunk, pinch it off, put it in the oil, grab a chunk, pinch it off into the oil until I've got a nice little row of several balls of Bulema dough. Just floating in that oil, getting really delicious. Okay. All right. I'm gonna set that to the side. So as you can see right here, I don't want to spill the oil on my computer, so I'm gonna bend the screen over. My work would not be happy. How'd you break your laptop? Oh, I just spilled a bunch of dough on it during a baking demo this weekend. All right, so here's our dough. I'm gonna clean off my work area. For this part is where it gets a little tricky. So it's important to have a very clean workspace to roll your dough. I'm gonna rinse my hands off again and quickly grab some paper towels. Marie knows about my affinity for paper towels. Sometimes I use an entire roll when I cook the other house, don't I, Mom? All right, so I'm just scraping off the schmutz from here before I get started with rolling, because it's very important that it's nice and clean, because you don't want it to stick to anything. And like I said, this dough can be a little finicky. So before you get started on this, you'll want to clean up and then get a cookie sheet ready to go with some parchment paper on the bottom. So I always use parchment paper when I'm baking because it's no fun to have stuff stick. If you use parchment paper, there's no worries. It's just taken care of for you. All right. So I'm going to take one of my beautiful pieces of dough here that's been floating in oil. So it's nice and shiny. And this is where you can start to stretch it out. Let me tilt this down. Stretch it out a little bit. I think Auntie Ray stretched it and didn't roll it, but I have a little rolling pin made of bamboo that I bought, and it's very handy for this. I also use it when I make barecas. So I'm just gonna roll this out nice and thin. And like I said, this is where this gets a little tricky because the dough likes to break and pop holes. All right, so can y'all see? I think you can see that. Okay, this very thin sheet of dough right here. And now I take a nice handful of the filling. This is something to keep in mind while you're working the filling. I like to mix it periodically during this process because the cheese has a tendency to sink to the bottom. You want to make sure that all of your bulemas have a good cheese ratio. I only know one person on this call who doesn't like them to have a lot of cheese in them. You know who you are. All right, so now we're going to take this nicely filled log and roll it into a log. Okay? Some of my filling's trying to escape. So I'm going to roll it into a log like this. There we go. So as you can see, I've got a nice little log of Bulema. And then there's a couple different things you can do with this. So the easier option is just to kind of roll the ends over. And now you've got a nice sort of log-shaped Bulema. And you can bake it just like that. So I'm going to stick that on my cookie sheet. I'll move so I don't have to keep leaving the screen. See, nice little log. The other option, and this is the way that I was taught by Auntie Ray, which is a little harder, is to take your dough and you'll start it with the log. My Minnesota accent's coming out. You'll start it with the log, you know, and then we'll bake it up really nice. And it's gonna just be so tasty. All right, so I'm gonna wipe my hands off. We've got our nice thin sheet of dough. Hi down there. I'm gonna fill it with this spinach filling again. And there we go. Get that a little even throughout our Bulema. Auntie Ray was very good at filling these, like just packing them filled with spinach. I have not yet achieved her level. But she also was making them for like 60 years by the time she taught me, so I think I can cut myself some slack, right? Okay, so now we've got our nice little log. And from this point, we're gonna just take it and spiral it. So this is the way she taught me. We've got our nice little spiral and we're just gonna pull the edge over, so right there. Nice little spiral Bulema. I'm gonna put that on my cookie sheet. I'll make another one in case my first one doesn't come out pretty once I bake it. Any questions, Rabbi, from the audience?
There's most comments that people have been using phyllo dough.
Oh.
And one person asked, can you show the balls of dough in your casserole dish?
Yes. Let's see. Can you see those?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Yeah, just sitting there in all the oil. That helps them get crispy. So it's an important part.
I'm noticing you're doing this very differently to how we do it in the more production line at SBH with the bazaar. This is a different technique. So I'm enjoying watching this technique.
Yeah, this is, what's the technique you do for the bazaar?
I see it, I can't really explain it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is the
dough stretches the whole way over the table at SBH, so the entire table is covered, and then you roll.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
I think I'm going to be having bulemas for lunch, or is that for Shabbat next week?
Yeah. All right. Oh, this one got a really nice spiral. Look at that. Okay, so sometimes you will find that your dough pops a couple holes in it. So when this happened, Auntie Ray always had some Bulema Band-Aids. So you can take a little piece of dough and stretch it on over your little holes in the Bulema.
So that's one thing which you would never do. We just start from scratch again at SBH. So I'm glad that you can do some, you can put a Band-Aid on them. That's good.
Oh,
There's
yeah,
a question here of what's the approximate size of the rolled out sheet?
Oh, okay. Let me take a look. Let's measure it. Honey, can you bring me a ruler? Can you bring it to me, please? Thank you. All right, I'm gonna have Andrew bring me a ruler. And we can get a good idea of what it actually is. It's hard to tell from the Zoom camera. Okay, so what I've been rolling them is about 8 inches by 4 or 5. So a nice rectangle. Okay. You know, one thing that no one has ever explained to me to my satisfaction is what is the difference between a Bulema and a Bereka and a Boyu? Or a Bulema and a Boyu, actually. I don't think a Bereka is a Boyu ever, right? So what's the difference? Can anyone tell me?
Is Bulemas is what the Turks call it, and Boyu is what the Rodas call it, no?
Okay.
So although that your family goes to SBH, the Scharhons were originally from the island of Rhodes. So you have Rodas in SBH and you can have Turks in EB, but that's another discussion. But I think that's the origin, and that Bulema is the Turkish way and the Boyu is the Rodas way.
Okay, and is there a difference in the recipe though? I wonder.
That's a better question.
Yeah. I would love to find out if anyone on the call knows as we get into our schmoozing section in a minute when I put these in the oven. I'm just gonna bake the 3 that I made. I'll make 1 more. And then we'll bake them. What other questions do we have as I form this guy? I'm just gonna stretch this one. I'm gonna go old school.
Sharon Babani is telling me that there's no difference in the recipe, just in the shape.
Ah, okay.
So you're using the logs or you're doing the rolls?
Okay, so is the log a Boyu and the roll is a Bulema?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And Marlene adds here that the reason why they're called Boyus is because that's the shape, that it's a pinwheel shape.
Oh, so these are technically boyus, not bulemas?
I think you've done boyus for us.
Okay, well, Auntie Ray called them bulemas.
And Vicky Lynn is telling me technically a boyu uses a boiled dough. I think so. I'm glad all the Sephardic ladies are helping me out here.
I love how we have so many different opinions. This is why I've never been satisfied with the answer, because there's different answers for everyone. I don't know. Vicky, I'm going with Vicky Lynn. I'm going with your opinion because you bribed me with martinis. Okay. All right. So here we go. Here are our beautifully pre-baked bulemas or boyus. Now, the last piece, the finishing touch, is I like to do a little bit of an egg wash and then sprinkle with more parm because you can never have too much. So let's see, look at our egg. It looks healthy. Do that up really quick. Also brush it with oil if you want. It gives it a little bit nicer of a color. Not a huge deal either way. There's our beaten egg. Got a little pastry brush right here to brush them real quick. I really hope that this batch doesn't explode everywhere in the oven and look like Frankenstein bulemas. That has happened to me before. They still taste good, no matter how they look, so it's okay. But the pressure is on right now. All right, I'll just hit these with a little sprinkling of parm on the top. I've got this really, the grated parm rather than shredded, so it's kind of the little sprinkly ones. My kids call it sprinkle cheese when we put it on pizza. All right. Yes, my love, you can have breakfast. Daddy, can you feed her? Okay, it's 11 o'clock. She's just eating breakfast now. This is brunch. Okay, I'm gonna throw these into my oven, which is not preheat, apparently. All right, here we go. Okay, my oven didn't preheat. So we're gonna wait a minute. We'll wait a couple minutes. I'll form a couple more while we make sure that happens. And then we'll pop these in the oven. I don't want to stick them in before it's preheated because then they'll burn. And that wouldn't be fun. So while I form a couple more and wait. Yeah, while we wait, let's schmooze a little bit.
Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit about how you learned Sephardic baking?
Okay, so I grew up in Minnesota. We do not have a Sephardic population in Minnesota. I don't know if there's any Sephardic Jews in Minnesota. At least if there are, I didn't know any. I never even heard the term when I moved to Seattle. So when I met Andrew, my husband, when I was 18, I met him at a Starbucks because we live in Seattle and that's how you meet people here. And I thought he was so cute. And he told me about himself and told me that he was Sephardic. And I was like, oh, well, what does that mean? Oh, well, we're Jews of Spanish descent. And my family is from, Rhodes and Turkey and so on and so forth. Well, before I started going out with Andrew, he invited me over one day. We were friends for a couple of years before we dated. He invited me over one day because he knew that I was a good baker. because he wanted his Auntie Ray to teach me how to make bulemas and barakas, because I think he was testing me. I think that if I didn't succeed at this, then we wouldn't be married today. That's my theory. He was testing me. He's like, can this Minnesota nice Ashkenazic, you know, girl learn how to make bulemas and barakas? So had me over. Auntie Ray taught me how to make them. I think she thought we were going out actually at the time. And then she found out that, you know, Andrew said, no, we're just friends, and she's Ashkenazic and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know, Auntie Ray looked a little disappointed. She's like, I am teaching this recipe to this, you know, to this girl. Why am I teaching this to her? No, she's nice. She would, I don't think she really thought that. I think she was just having fun teaching me how to make these. I can't remember if we did bulemas and barakas in the same day. We probably did. Because she just was a machine at making these. So I'm using a Band-Aid on this one because we had a little bit of an explosion. So we were just baking away, and I thought it was really fun. That was my first time that I ever made anything Sephardic. I'd eaten Auntie Ray's bulemas and barakas.
Can we see that Andrew is here just because he can smell the food?
Yeah, honey. Oh, he claims he's just making sure the oven's preheating.
There you go. Where was he half an hour ago? That's the question. Come on.
Right? He's keeping Sam entertained. He's not as useless as an etrog after Sukkot, I promise. Okay, so anyway, so that was my first exposure. I mean, I think I'd eaten bulemas and barakas for Shabbat lunch at my in-laws, you know, before, when Andrew and I were just friends, because Marie and Ellen always used to have people over, and we would, you know, all of Andrew's friends, and we would eat them, and I thought they were so good. I mean, you know, there's nothing wrong with a bagel, but it's not a bulema. So that was the first thing, and then from there, we started, I think I made mostachudos with him. I learned how to make, this after we started going out is when I learned how to make bizcochos with Auntie Belle, Marie's aunt. And I think Auntie Kay made mostachudos with us one time actually also. She made them bell-shaped, which I thought was cool. And she used to add a little bit of orange zest to them, which is not the way that Marie makes them. So it's very interesting to me how many different varieties and takes there are on all the Sephardic food, but it's all so delicious. So really, my secret reason that I wanted to marry a Sephardic Jew is so I never had to eat gefilte fish again. See Andrew's face right now.
I love that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, gefilte fish.
I guess that's the Ashkenazic food that I can't get past.
Ugh. Yeah. So, you know, growing up in Minnesota, I used to go fishing occasionally with my dad, where we'd, you know, hang out on a boat on Medicine Lake in Minnesota. And I don't remember, I think one day we were just like snacking on some baby carrots, and my dad threw, you know, sometimes in the bag of carrots, they're always kind of like the little gross one. He threw it into the water and he goes, "That's how you catch a gefilte fish." I thought he was serious. I was like, that's what? I mean, it makes sense. So I thought that was fun. All right, I'm gonna do one more. Make sure the oven is nicely preheated since I messed up the timing on that. Let's see, what other Sephardic stories do I have? Wow. One thing that I started making later was bumuelos, or on Hanukkah, which I found in a recipe book because I I don't know. I didn't want to make latkes because they make your kitchen smell. So do buñuelos, but not as bad. So I decided to make those one year, and that was fun. Right now, I'm tearing up a little more spinach because a lot of the cheese landed on the bottom of the bowl, which is fine. This is another way to do it. You can just tear it up and smush it in. Also works. So, all right, let's go one more. And then we'll bake them. Hopefully they bake quickly. Okay. Oh, look at that. See, we've got a little hole in him. So we'll make another Band-Aid. Auntie Ray did not have to make as many Band-Aids as I did. That's what Andrew was telling me in his head. I can read his brain right now. Being married for 14 years, we can read someone's mind. All right, sometimes. All right, there we go. Last one. Okay. Oh, he's got a lot of holes in him. Okay, let's try another good Band-Aid. See, sometimes this dough can be finicky. And I've been making these for a while. So let's just patch that guy up. That's more than a Band-Aid. That's like a wound covering. All right, this one might explode. That's okay. We'll just keep it going. All right, so let's brush the 4 that I just made. So they're nice and pretty. Hope they come out good. All right. Okay, so there you go. This is not my most uniform batch, but that's okay. All right, computer, set a timer for 15 minutes.
15 minutes, starting now.
Oh, the magic of Alexa. Auntie Ray definitely didn't do that. I don't think she had an Alexa. All right, so what questions do you have? Let's schmooze. Tell me about yourselves. Do we unmute people?
Very Sephardic, there's an Ashkenazic wives support group for all the Ashkenazic women who married Sephardic husbands.
There is? How do I join that?
I'll PM you later.
Okay, I like it. I love that. That's how we learn all of the things. What else? Trying to think of some more funny stories. Oh, when Andrew and I got married at SBH, we were the 3rd generation couple to be married in the synagogue by Rabbi Maimon, who sadly passed a couple of years ago, right? Was it 2 years ago? Or was it last year?
Just over a year, right before Rosh Hashanah.
Just over a year ago, yeah. And that was a very fun experience for me that I never expected to have, to get married in the synagogue by the rabbi who married my in-laws and both sets of my husband's grandparents. And I think he was their moil too. So maybe not for the grandparents. Let's see. But yeah, it was a different experience. It was fun. And let's see, Andrew, do you have any fun stories? Do you want to pop in and talk for a few minutes while these bulemas bake? No, he's trying to save me. He's hiding. Are you trying to fix our heater broke last night. So our house is very cold right now. Andrew's Mr. Fix-It. I don't know if this is fair of me to say, but my experience, Sephardic men are better at fixing things than Ashkenazic men. definitely handier. So that's something we can talk about in the support group.
There's a question, how long is the baking time for the spirals versus the logs?
You know, I think about the same. So it's 15 to 20 minutes. It's really just until they look done, which is when they're golden and they smell good.
And also, if there are any other traditional fillings other than spinach and cheese?
So you can make other filled pastries, but then it wouldn't be a Bulema.
Correct.
It would be something else.
It would be something else. There you go. I want to stay with that. If you want to put other things in it, you can. It's just don't call it a Bulema.
That's right. You can make, so one thing we make is burekas, which are a different dough, and they're filled with a potato and cheese mixture. So it's like a Sephardic knish, but don't, it's better though, because it doesn't have onions. I mean, I like the onions in the knish. I know, I was baiting you. It's not a knish, it's better, it's more like an empanada. It's shaped like an empanada anyway, but that is a bureka.
Can you have, here's a question, can you have a Bulema that is gluten-free, dairy-free, and doesn't have spinach?
Oh my gosh. Did Rachel ask that?
I'm not really reading my sources, but that question came to me. It wasn't in the group chat, but I got a private message about that.
Oh yeah, let's see, gluten-free. You know what, if you can make that happen, Rachel Rusak, I would be very impressed. You know, the thing is you could probably try to make it gluten-free, but the issue with gluten-free is the gluten in the dough is what helps it stretch. So this recipe would probably not lend itself well to a gluten-free flour. A bureka you might be able to do. And you could probably use like diet, you know, fake cheese. But if it doesn't have spinach, it's not a Bulema. So that is definitely, I mean, dietary restrictions aside, I would just go for a different recipe at that point. I'm gonna cut up more of the spinach. Well, what other questions? I like that one. That was a tough one. Seeing more blinking come through. Oh wow, they're starting to smell good. This is a good sign.
I really want that Zoom feature being able to smell your kitchen.
Oh, right?
There.
We'll have to ask them if they can release that at some point. There'll be a feature. You think they're working on it, honey? You have to install some new hardware in your computer that creates chemical compounds, scent chemical compounds. Okay, so all that spinach is done, so I can pour more of these things. We'll take you guys over to the oven. So you can see them.
Oh, nice. So, Nicole, a few people are backing you up, saying you can't use gluten-free flour for this recipe. It wouldn't really work.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I've never tried.
Lily Golan, who's a wonderful baker, has put a few messages in the chat about this. So, there you go.
Yeah, it would be, because the gluten is what allows the dough to stretch, it really would be a tough one. Gluten-free flours, when you're experimenting with them, can kind of lend themselves better to crumbly sort of textures. You can do cookies with them. Maybe a bureka. I've never tried it though. I'm not that good of a friend to Rachel. I've tried other gluten-free things for her, like gluten-free cake. I made her a gluten-free, dairy-free birthday cake one year.
Oh, hold on. I think the Rubisa has some to show us. Hold on. Rubisa, can you unmute yourself?
This is my first time ever making any of it, so it's all thanks to you, Nicole. And I've not yet put mine in the oven. I was only private messaging my husband to show off that I had done something. So Tray one.
Wow.
Oh.
There's a few trays like that. So thank you, Nicole, for making this happen.
You're welcome. Thank you for making following along. So fun. Want a couple more? So I did an experiment last night where I made some of the dough in advance and then I let it rise in the fridge overnight. And then this morning, broke it into some of these dough balls. I'm gonna see how this works. To see if this makes the dough easier to work with. And since the oven had issues, you get to play along with me. All right, so here's our refrigerated Bulema dough. This is my experiment. I learned about this slow rising process. I'm gonna give a little shout out to my Auntie Gumby from Minnesota who's on the call today. She bought me a book by her good friend, Jeff Hertzberg, called Artisan Bread in 5 minutes a Day. And this book has this great technique about high moisture doughs and letting them rise for, I mean, really up to 2 weeks in the fridge. You can let the dough kind of continue to ferment. But as a result of reading that, I've started experimenting a lot with doing overnight rises of doughs in the fridge and then working them after they've risen when they're cool. And I find sometimes that they're a lot easier, they're more forgiving, and the temperature of the dough can help make it a little easier to work with. So this is my experimental dough batch that I made last night, and I'm very curious if it is easier to work with. And I'll let you know, and then you can try it too. So far, about the same. All right, let's mix that.
How much more time in the oven?
They look almost done to me. They're pretty brown. The Alexa said, computer, how much time left on my timer? Computer, how much longer on my timer?
You have 4 minutes and 50 seconds left on your 15-minute
Okay,
timer.
let's give it 5 minutes. Alexa says it needs 5 more minutes. We're almost done. Oh no, the other Alexa heard me and started a timer. She's everywhere. She's just watching me all over the house and listening. Okay, here's another one. While these things bake. Oh, they look good though. They're getting really nice color. Let me move this over. Look at that. You see them? Oh, they cut them really nice. They're a little, I baked them on convection, so I think they're baking up a little faster than normal. But they're looking good. All right, let's try a couple more. Just a few more minutes and then you guys can see them. And I'll test out my artisan bread Bulema method. The nice thing about doing the dough the night before, if this works, let's hope it does, is it's just less work in the same day. You know, since these are so labor intensive, it's just nice to get some of it done in advance. Like you don't already have enough to do, right? I like these labor intensive recipes. They're just kind of, I don't know, just transport me back. I'm like thinking, okay, my great grandma used to spend all day in the kitchen making, you know, very difficult things.
Can you lower your camera a little bit so we can see you? Your hands?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Here we go. Is that better?
Yeah.
Here's a very pretty one. See, I also get better as I go throughout this. So, so recently, this is not a Sephardic recipe that I made, but they were very labor intensive. My friend Fran and I made these morning buns from the Tartine Cookbook, which is a bakery in San Francisco. I've got this, so my kids are in school, and since we're, trapped at home due to COVID, we've got a little pod of 3 families that, kids in school, in virtual school together in my basement. But Fran's one of the other moms, and she comes over and bakes with me and comes over and makes lunch for the kids, which is really nice. She's amazing. And she and I made, for Break the Fast this year, these morning buns from the Tartine Cookbook, which are basically a croissant dough filled with butter and cinnamon sugar and orange zest. And they're obscene, but talk about labor intensive. I mean, they make Bulemas look like nothing. You have to make 3 days to make that dough, to make that croissant dough. Giant sheet of butter. I mean, I literally took, I think, 6 sticks of butter and smooshed them together into a giant butter rectangle to stick into that dough. And that was fun. I've never done that with butter before. That was enjoyable. Oh my gosh, they're getting so bright. I think these are done. I'm gonna take them out. That was really fast. Okay. Way to go, convection oven. Okay, look at that.
Oh, wow. That is a pro. I love that.
So this one is my favorite. So perfect. Beautiful spiral. I don't want to eat them yet because I'm going to burn my mouth. And then you can't taste anything, and that's no fun. So let's look at these guys a little bit.
Nicole, we're running out of time. So what are your final thoughts? Now you're showing us those beautiful, beautiful bulemas and boyos.
Look at that. My final thoughts are, these are difficult, but they are well worth it. Oh, did I lose you? Oh no.
I can hear you.
There we go. I didn't lose you. Hi, okay. They're beautiful and difficult, very difficult, but well worth it. They freeze beautifully. Just freeze them on a cookie sheet flat because otherwise they'll stick together. Computer, stop timer. And I'm multitasking. And then you can just warm them up in your oven for Shabbat lunch, or just so you know. Just like the Seattle Sephardic community does. That's my favorite thing to do, is to eat bulemas at my in-laws for Shabbat lunch. So.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us. And a big thank you to Nicole for being an amazing, amazing demonstrator today of how to make boyos and bulemas. And we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. All right, take care, everyone. Happy Sunday. Go Seahawks.
Bye.
Bye.
Go Hawks. Bye, everyone.